Hello and welcome to National Hog Farmer at the Slat Level. I'm Ann Hess. Today our topic is wean-to-market filtration, and on hand we have Dr. Adam Schelkopf with Pipestone Veterinary Service. Welcome, Adam, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Ann. Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into today's discussion, I'd like to remind the audience tuning in, you can post any questions you may have in the chat, and we'll be sure to get those over to Adam. So, Adam, for those who might not be familiar with Pipestone, tell us more about the company, its services and partnerships, and in your role there.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Ann. I appreciate the invitation. Pipestone is really a company built on a mission to helping farmers. We do that through a number of different avenues, a couple of those being through veterinary service, traditional veterinary service for those farmers in U.S. and also a little bit internationally on that raise pigs for a living. Our business is primarily built on helping farmers who are in hog production, but not exclusively. A couple other things, we certainly help farmers with sow management. We have a component of our business that helps farmers with nutrition for their pigs. And then also we have an area we help with different areas of their business, be it records or accounting or a couple other things. We do partner with farmers on a couple different entities as well. One of them more visible probably is Holstone on the packing entity, and a couple other ones. So a number of different avenues in which we help farmers.
Very good. Well, today our topic is wean-to-market filtration. Before we get into that application at the wean-to-market level, I understand filtration has become one of the pillars of sow farm biosecurity at Pipestone. Tell us more about how this technology works and how it's progressed over the years.
Absolutely. As we look at just ways of trying to biosecure sow facilities, that's one of the primary things that we do is trying to help farmers have a healthy source of wean pigs. And that starts with biosecurity at their sow farm. There's a ton of different components that go into how do we biosecure a sow facility, but one of those is certainly air filtration. That technology's been around for probably 20 years or somewhere around there. It really started back with air filtration around bore studs, and then progressed in 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in that time frame towards larger scale air filtration on commercial sow units, and really proved its concept here over the last 20 years to be a very reliable source of providing an added layer of protection to sow facilities against airborne transmission of PRRS virus, as well as other areas. And so the technology isn't new to us, but the application to the wean to market, generally speaking, has not been done. And so that's where the conversation really started around, can we apply this technology in a broader base to wean to market to help combat that area of transmission of PRRS virus?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, that this could be part of the next generation of wean to market biosecurity. You've also, have offered some examples both internationally and domestically in your recent article on National Hog Farmer. Tell us first about Pipestone's experience in China with filtration.
We've had experience in China here for somewhere around 15 years, and China's got a host of different diseases they face, but some of them do transmit via air. PRRS virus, China has PRRS virus, as well as foot and mouth and other, or excuse me, not foot and mouth, African swine fever, as well as other diseases. And so uh, the team in China has had a great experience in trying to continue to advance biosecurity, building on principles that we have embraced here in the United States, but trying to face new different disease challenges. And so over, I don't know, the last 5, 6, 7 years, somewhere in that time frame, the team in China really advanced some of the thought processes to, if we believe that we can control PRRS and ASF through some of the sow facilities with those technologies, can we utilize that on wean to market assets? And through trial and error and refinement of design and a little bit different strategy than what we'll talk about today, I would say the team has been very successful at preventing PRRS transmission as well as foot and mouth, or excuse me, as well as African swine fever, through that use of filtration on wean to market assets. So it really is what kind of got us thinking: is that a broader based technology that now is the time that we can start to think about adopting in United States as we continue to battle challenging PRRS virus transmission in and out of the fall, spring, and even what seems to be today. It's a year-round type of disease that is challenging wean-to-market assets as well as sow facilities.
Let's talk about the adoption of it in the United States. In your article, you mentioned it has been used domestically in wean-to-market facilities. How is it being used?
The discussion, I would say, started probably within the last year or so, just out of sheer fatigue and frustration in areas in which farmers, right, they have their wean to market assets, they have their farm, and they generally are more sow or more pig dense areas than sow facilities. Through just years of trying to advance in sow biosecurity, one of the strategies is move sows more to the periphery of the corn belt or of the pig belt and relocate those assets away from hog dense areas. So that, in combination with air filtration and other steps, has been a nice solution to help advance sow biosecurity. We, in market assets, generally speaking, we're not going to be able to relocate assets like we do or like we think of in terms of sows. So repositioning the thought process, can we utilize air filtration to help mitigate or reduce the break rates on wean to market assets? If we don't have other ways of putting technologies in place to help combat the air transmission of the virus, is filtration one of those that we can use? And so that discussion really has happened, I would say, over the last year, and we've tried to advance it with if we just adopt similar thought processes to how we've done it on a sow basis, are there components of that that we can put into a wean to market facility and achieve some level of protection against air transmission? I think we do have to think about the application a little bit different. Wean to market facilities, be it nursery, feeder to finish, or true wean to market barns, they're built differently. They're certainly more simple than multi airspace, larger sow facilities. And so the design could be certainly more easy to implement. That being said, there are different components about wean to market facilities that we may have to think differently. Um, and whether that's, barns that utilize tunnel ventilation, how can we, or is it even possible to utilize filtration or tunnel? Do we have to think about a seasonal approach in which our goal is really air filtration on low stages of ventilation, and for uh, earlier in the growing pig cycle, which we may be able to filter, you know through 50 days or 60 days on feed, and then once barns are at higher rates of ventilation, we may have to abandon the technology, but it at least allows a certain period of time for pigs to stay under filtration where they're younger, more susceptible to disease, need time for immunity or PRRS vaccine to take hold in those pigs, right? It buys us time to get those pigs out into their growing cycle a little bit more. So that's a little bit more of how we've thought about the concept today. Is it may just be for a lower stage of ventilation in this moment, and we may have to accept that there's going to be periods where we go unfiltered, but generally speaking, those are going to be warmer summer months in which we hope transmission of virus is a little bit less just because of environmental conditions.
So let's talk about those time periods when filtration could be used. What would a facility need to consider in terms of installation, maintenance, and labor?
It's a learning process, and that's the thing that I think I want to certainly convey today is we don't have a perfect design. We don't have enough history to demonstrate what the true ROI is. I wouldn't even say we have what's going to be the perfect design in the future. It's in a phase of trial and error at this point. But generally speaking, what has been utilized so far and what's been adopted is very simple principles of negative filtration systems in which air is coming through sealing inlets, and the application of using a filter system in the attic of these barns and forcing air to come through air filtration when it's through attic ventilation or through inlet ventilation. That allows us in those lower stages of ventilation to filter all of the incoming air. Now, certainly, if we think in terms of a sow farm, we're worried about every single leak, right? Every way that air can come into that facility, and putting a host of different measures in place to protect against those. In the early designs, I think we have to think a little bit differently. We may not be going for perfection like we strive for in the sow farm. It may be a simple reduction. Um, the majority of the time, the majority of the air leaks, we're going to minimize, and we're going to force the majority of the air through filtration and accept there may be small levels of risk that we're unable to protect for cost effectively in this moment. There's less critical access points. There's less entries to the barn of personnel, less exits of the barn of pigs, if we think about that. So some of those critical access points, we're still working on what those designs and how much effort or cost need to be placed into those. But I think the other question you asked is just from a mechanics and labor and things like that. Again, wean-to-market facilities tend to be a little more simple. They tend to have less personnel. You may have a single caretaker on a wean-to-market facility. You may have him or her checking pigs twice a day, in which it's less entries in the barn, less exposure to outside air. What does it take for an actual labor? To be determined yet. If we think about it in terms of the sow farm, we have a dedicated person that is on that farm all of the time, checking, maintaining, adjusting the filtration system. Probably don't think in that level of scrutiny on a wean to market asset. It may require that in time. There definitely has to be some oversight of the filtration system, somebody monitoring that in addition to all the other components of raising pigs in that barn, feed, water, air, etc. But how to budget that today, in my opinion, that's a lower expenditure of time or cost on maintaining the system, just because it's not quite as a complex system as the sow farm is.
Well, you led me to my next question in terms of cost. How feasible is it to add filtration to a wean market facility, and what kind of ROI would be looking at on this long-term investment?
The cost side, I think, is that's an easier one for us to look at today. And the early models that have adopted, it's applying a filter box, it's applying filters in the attic, it's some infrastructure to seal up the attic a little bit. It may be a little bit of infrastructure around the remainder of the facility to control some other leaks, but it's not a significant add when you look at the remainder of the facility. So I'm going to ballpark today and say round figures would tell you $20 a space have been able to get it done. Now there's a wide variety around that number. And so I don't want that to be thought of as the end all be all. Again, there's going to be a lot of iterations to design. I know from the initial barns that have been done to other designs already, there's been different adoptions of strategies and ways of thinking about it. But that's the number I have in my head, and based on some initial models that it can probably be done for. And um, the barn can be reasonably filtered utilizing that sort of cost structure. The ROI is the $1 million question. Um, we don't have enough duration yet to be able to feel confident that we've had enough repetitions in filtered farms versus not, and demonstrate what is that true reduction. But what we know today is certainly the cost of those breaks continue to escalate when you look at the value of pigs, when you look at the detrimental nature of the virus we face today and the higher mortalities that we see with some of these wean to market breaks. And if I'm a farmer who has a site that's in a pig dense area that's breaking every single turn, it's easy to calculate what that cost is from a mortality and performance. And in just very simple ways of thinking about it, $20 a space is a pretty easy number to overcome based on some of the experiences and some of the costs of the breaks today.
Absolutely. Well, after 2 decades of filtration experience on the south side, what are some lessons the industry's learned that maybe can be applied here?
It's a great question. We've learned so much in 20 years, and we, by all means, do not have it perfected yet. We know for a fact that air filtration does reduce transmission of that virus. We've demonstrated over time that we can have farms that are infected less when they are under filtration. Um, we know that we have to continue to advance the type of filter that we use, the ways in which we design facilities, the ways in which we operate critical access points. Um, and there's even major differences in filtration today versus positive or negative ventilation. Both of them are effective methods. What I'm referring to on the wean to market is all negative because it's refinement of existing ventilation systems in wean to market barns. Is positive an alternative strategy? It very well may be. I don't even know yet how to go about that because we focused on remodeling of existing facilities. And much of this really started too um, with how do we repurpose sow assets that were filtered and were going to be changed over to wean to market assets. Embracing the current system that was in place of filtration and just leaving that in place as farms converted to being nursery or wean to market assets is what spurred a lot of the discussion. Hey, this over a number of repetitions has worked, that we're maintaining these old sow facilities as wean to market assets. They're maintaining a negative status group after group. The filtration system is adequate enough to be able to keep virus out as wean to market assets. How can we embrace it on non-filtered sites and start to remodel those sites to be able to embrace the same sort of technology? The thing I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, at least, is uh, we've always had the highest of biosecurity standards when we think about sow farms, whether that's shower in, shower out, disinfection and downtime rooms, ways of loading pigs with stage loading, right? There's a host of things that are all surrounding biosecurity. They're not air filtration. We have to control the very simple ways that disease can get into a farm. Air filtration was kind of one of the last ones that we were unable to control, and then filtration came into play to help us. We in the market, we have a lot of room as an industry to move the needle on just very simple, rudimentary components of biosecurity and we in the market. So thinking that we can just simply filter a barn and it's going to keep virus out when we refuse to shower in, shower out, or do some of the other simple components, we have to improve all of the components of biosecurity if we're going to think that we should employ air filtration as well in these wean to market assets.
Yeah, filtration is just a small part of the whole biosecurity package that facilities need to incorporate daily.
It really is. It's a component, and it really comes after we have crossed off the other components to the list that we're doing X, Y, and Z correctly. Filtration augments what we've already put in place.
Dr. Adam Schelkopf, Pipestone Veterinary Services, thank you so much for taking us in the barn today and sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Ann. Really appreciate it.
For more pork production conversations and demos from the slat level, be sure to check out the At the Slat page on National Hog Farmer's website. For National Hog Farmer, I'm Ann Hess.